On March 27, 2026, a barrel of Brent crude oil hit $112.57. The last time oil was this expensive, Russia had just invaded Ukraine. But this time the cause isn't a European land war. It's a small island in the Persian Gulf, barely 25 square kilometers, that carries 90% of Iran's entire oil exports. The island is called Kharg, and the United States is preparing to take it. This is not speculation. The 82nd Airborne Division and 2,500 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit have been deployed to the region. Pentagon officials are openly discussing a final blow strategy. And the question everyone should be asking isn't whether it will happen, it's what happens to the global economy when it does. Let's break down exactly how we got here and what comes next. 28 days ago, on February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated air campaign against Iran. The stated objective was the elimination of Iran's nuclear weapons program and its ballistic missile infrastructure. Within the first 72 hours, coalition forces destroyed two-thirds of Iran's known weapons production facilities. Iran's supreme leader was killed in a targeted strike during the first week. But Iran didn't collapse, it adapted. What most people don't realize is that Iran has been preparing for this war for over a decade. Their strategy was never to win a conventional air war against the United States. That's impossible. Instead, Iran activated what military analysts call the Thousand Cuts Doctrine. Hundreds of missile and drone launches per day, attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, Hezbollah rocket barrages into northern Israel, proxy strikes across Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. And here's what nobody is talking about. The economic dimension of this war is more dangerous than the military one. The Strait of Hormuz is a 39-kilometer-wide chokepoint between Iran and Oman. Every single day, approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through it. That's roughly 20% of the world's total petroleum consumption. Iran hasn't closed the strait, not technically. They've declared it open to non-hostile nations. But any vessel associated with the United States, Israel, or their direct military partners is subject to seizure. The result is a de facto partial blockade. Insurance rates for tankers transiting Hormuz have increased by 400%. Several major shipping companies have rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 10 to 14 days to delivery times. Oil that was already expensive became scarce, and scarcity became panic. Goldman Sachs released a forecast this week projecting Brent crude at $110 average through April, with a realistic upside scenario of $130 if Kharg Island is directly targeted. That's not a war premium. That's a structural shift in global energy pricing. Now let's talk about Kharg Island, because this is where the war is heading. Kharg Island sits 25 kilometers off Iran's southern coast in the Persian Gulf. It's small, flat, and militarily insignificant in conventional terms, but economically, it's one of the most important pieces of real estate on Earth. Iran's main oil export terminal is located here. 6 loading berths capable of handling the largest supertankers in the world. Underground storage facilities holding millions of barrels. Pipeline connections to every major Iranian oil field. If you control Kharg, you control Iran's revenue. And without revenue, Iran can't sustain a prolonged war. This is why the Pentagon is interested. According to reports from Axios and NBC News, the Trump administration is actively considering either a direct seizure of Kharg Island or a naval blockade that would achieve the same result without boots on the ground. The 82nd Airborne deployment suggests the seizure option is on the table. You don't send paratroopers to enforce a blockade. But here's the calculation that makes this so dangerous. Iran generates approximately $50 billion per year from oil exports, roughly $137 million per day. If Kharg is taken or blockaded, that revenue drops to near zero overnight. Iran's government, already under enormous pressure from 28 days of airstrikes, would face economic collapse within weeks. The problem is what Iran does in response. Military analysts at CSIS and IISS have modeled this scenario extensively. The consensus is that Iran would respond to a Kharg seizure with everything it has left, including potential attacks on Saudi and Emirati oil infrastructure across the Gulf. If Saudi Aramco facilities at Ras Tanura or Abqaiq are hit, the global oil supply doesn't lose 20%, it loses 40%. At 40% supply disruption, oil doesn't go to $130, it goes to $200, and at $200 oil, the global economy enters a recession within 90 days. Goldman Sachs, JPMorgan, and the IMF have all modeled this. The probability estimates range from 30% to 50%. Now let's zoom out, because Iran isn't the only crisis burning right now. As of today, there are 5 active military conflicts or confrontations happening simultaneously. The Iran War, the Russia-Ukraine War, which just entered a new spring offensive with Russia launching a record 948 drones in a single 24-hour period. The U.S. intervention in Venezuela, where American special forces extracted opposition leader Maria Corina Machado in a covert operation. The Pakistan-Afghanistan border clashes. And the slow-burning China-Taiwan standoff, which has temporarily de-escalated but remains one miscalculation away from ignition. 5 flashpoints, 3 of them involve nuclear-armed states, and for the first time since 1970, there is no active nuclear arms limitation treaty in force. The New START agreement expired on February 5, 2026, without renewal. There is currently no legal limit on the number of nuclear warheads the United States and Russia can deploy. None. This is the backdrop against which global military spending has reached $2.6 trillion, the highest level since the Cold War. The United States alone now spends over $1 trillion annually on defense, a 13.4% increase from last year. China is at $278 billion. India increased its defense budget by 15%, its largest jump in a decade. Europe is collectively spending at rates not seen since the 1980s. On March 13th, Iran fired a ballistic missile that entered Turkish airspace near Incirlik Air Base. NATO Patriot systems intercepted it. This was the first time a ballistic missile from a non-NATO state directly targeted NATO territory since the alliance was founded in 1949. Turkey has since deployed 3 Patriot batteries and will host the 2026 NATO summit in Ankara this July. The question of Article 5, NATO's collective defense clause, is no longer theoretical. It was tested. And the answer the alliance gave was Patriot missiles, not diplomacy. So what happens next? Here are the 3 most likely scenarios. Scenario 1, the United States seizes Kharg Island within the next 10 days. Iran's oil revenue collapses. The war enters an endgame phase within 6 to 8 weeks. Oil spikes to $130 to $140 but stabilizes as Iranian resistance fades. This is the Pentagon's preferred outcome. Probability, 40%. Scenario 2, the United States imposes a naval blockade instead of a direct seizure. Iran retaliates against Gulf state oil infrastructure. Saudi facilities are damaged. Oil hits $180 to $200. Global recession begins by Q3 2026. The war expands. Probability, 35%. Scenario 3, a diplomatic breakthrough. Iran accepts a modified version of the Witkoff 15-point peace proposal. Sanctions are partially lifted in exchange for nuclear dismantlement and a ceasefire. Oil drops back to $85 within months. Probability, 25%, and falling every day the bombing continues. The next 10 days will determine which scenario plays out. The 82nd Airborne is in position. The Marines are in position. Iran's remaining missile stockpile is estimated at 40% of pre-war levels. And every day that passes, $137 million in oil revenue fuels Iran's ability to keep fighting. One island, 25 square kilometers, 90% of a nation's wealth, and possibly the trigger for the worst economic crisis since 2008. That's the $112 oil war, and it's just getting started. What do you think happens next? Invasion, blockade, or peace deal? Drop your prediction in the comments. And if you want to understand power as it actually works, not as politicians describe it, subscribe to Realpolitik. New analysis every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.